So Dr. Nika Wayman, I actually started my career at UMBC. So I was a mechanical engineering major undergrad back in a long time ago. And I was part of the Barhoff program when I was there. So I was also a very low number M. From there, I went to Georgia Tech and I did mechanical engineering PhD, but my research was in bioengineering. So that's when I started kind of blending the engineering and sciences. Sorry if you hear my kids talking in the background. And then from there, I went to work at Becton Dickinson, so a private sector company in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey, working on anesthesia products. And then from there, I went to work for the federal government at USAID, U.S. Agency for International Development. So looking at science and engineering that could help with global development challenges in over 50 countries. And now I'm back at UMBC, where I'm an associate dean. I work at the Shady Grove campus, and I oversee undergraduate and graduate biotech programs. So I think that was the short intro that you wanted us to do, so I'll stop there.
I will ask you, what was it in mechanical engineering that you focused in on?
So at UMBC, it was just a degree in mechanical engineering, but in grad school, it was in bioengineering, biophysics. So I researched a molecule called selectins. So I was focused on E-selectin molecules that mediates adhesion between your white blood cells and your endothelial cells. So when you have injury in your body and you need your white blood cells to get there to heal that injury, the selectin molecules mediate that first touch that then allows it to get to the site of injury. So it was a mix of mechanical and chemical, and then of course the biomedical application.
That's wonderful. We have a lot of interdisciplinary minds in our group, so it's really helpful to see how the sciences and engineering fields can come together.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Kennedy?
So hi, yes, I'm Sharon Kennedy. I currently am Director for Global Technology in Brazil it's the Global Technology Center at Colgate. I've been working at Colgate for 18 years. So I started out undergraduate at North Carolina A&T State University. From there, I went to get a PhD at the University of North Carolina, focused on physical chemistry. So I studied polymeric surfactants. And from there, I did a postdoc at National Institute of Standards and Technology, so NIST, studying thin films. And while I was at NIST, I went to a NOBCHE, National Organization of Black Chemists and Chemical Engineering. I went to a conference and I was recruited for Colgate-Palmolive. And so I've been at Colgate-Palmolive since then for 18 years. I think one of your questions was what led me into this direction. So started out loving math and science, so of course directed into chemistry. A lot of exploration led me to the PhD. But in Colgate, the thing that I did a lot was explore. So I always wanted to find out what was the best fit for me. So if something wasn't right, then I would change a lot. So during Colgate, I've been in several different roles, from leading a basic science lab in toothbrushes. I did an assignment in Europe. I did an assignment in Mexico. Actually, I'm still quarantining in Mexico right now, and then I'm going to Brazil. And one of the things that I've always done was choose opportunity over being safe and cautious, because I really believe it's important to know what's the thing that is best suited for you. And so I've been exploring ever since to get to this opportunity. So that's where I am now.
That's wonderful. And that's something we're probably going to revisit, because I'd like to hear more about what you consider opportunity. That'd be an interesting discussion. Dr. Vaughn?
Morning, everybody. My name is Nicole Vaughn, and I'm trying to think how I can relate to where you all are sitting right now. And I participated in summer research experiences at University of Maryland, College Park, back in '93, because I was a part of the Bridge program. So if you guys are calculating, I was in Bridge 1995. That was the freshman year. And one of the things as I was doing research, one, it was I couldn't necessarily get an internship that sophomore year. And so I said, let's do some research. That was the starting point. But as I got in the lab and thought about, you know, do I like this or not? I continued even during the school year and graduated with a bachelor's in chemical engineering from College Park. But then I stayed for the master's degree with the same professor who's no longer at Maryland, but I still stay in contact with him, Dr. Michael Harris, who's now at Purdue. So I was at Maryland, did the master's degree, which was a continuation of my research as an undergrad, and then transferred. So Dr. Harris is a Black professor. I felt like he was actually family and continued to support me. I think the confidence level that I had back then, it was like, okay, if I'm going to do this, let's at least stick with somebody I know who cares. And so that would be one bit of advice when you choose the school you go to. Definitely understand the professors, the dynamic of the school, the interest and support you'll have is really, it was critical for my success. So I graduated from Purdue with a PhD in chemical engineering, and the area was in interfacial phenomena. And during the whole time, a lot of people, so for those of you who may be thinking, well, I don't really know what I want to do with the PhD, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but the options, like Dr. Kennedy said, I tried to keep them open. And the cheering section was pretty strong in that you do it. You all may have people telling you to do it because they're not going to do it. And I did it. I kept going. But the point I wanted to make was, even when I was in my PhD program about to give my defense, I thought in my head, I was going to want to be a professor. But along the way, so Dr. Kennedy was recruited at Novachet. At Purdue, they have a career development office, like most campuses. And the ExxonMobil recruiting team came, I was like maybe in my second year towards finishing, and I graduated in 2010. So that was 10 years from 99 to it was 10 years all the way through, from 95 when I started to 2005 to get the PhD. I went straight through. And they just came to campus and was, you know, the recruiter was just like, you know, you should think about other alternatives. And we just talked, had made my decision, multiple grants for, you know, going into R&D at a school. So it really did come down to a personal choice of, I wanted to do something that had an impact on society, but also very close to the customer. So right now at ExxonMobil, I am the Asia Pacific Finished Lubricants Technical Manager. And I'm based in Shanghai, China. My family and I have 2 kids. My daughter is 12 and my son is 8. And my assignment, I've been in it for a year. However, with COVID-19, we have been here back in the States for at least 5 months. I think we're going on 6, just because the borders closed on us when we were out for Chinese New Year. But I'm still doing my role from a distance. So the aspects of what I'm doing was another one, but I'll be quiet so the next person can go. But I'm based in Shanghai, but I have people who report to me in Singapore, in India, Japan, as well as South Korea. And what we're doing is, when you get your oil changed, when you see wind turbines, when you see the trucks on the road, anything that has moving parts requires lubrication. And so this, we call it a marketing business unit. This business is selling all the Mobil brand products for North AP and South AP. Think Mobil One, Mobil Delvac, Mobil SHD, all these products. Our technical team makes sure the products are working as promised, as well as supporting the operation units. So I'll be quiet.
Thank you. Chelsea, can you just, we've heard a few people mention Novachet, and I know you've met some of our speakers through Novachet. Can you just talk about what Novachet is and the important role it plays in your academic trajectory?
Sure. So NOBSHE, if you are not aware, is the national organization for Black chemists and chemical engineers. So I joined NOBSHE actually in undergrad at Howard, and then I transitioned and stayed in the program when I got to UMD. So we do have a UMD chapter. And I would just say the importance of NOBSHE really is presenting in a group of people that look like yourself, networking with people that look like yourself. I found the biggest part of NOBSHE for me was networking. I met Dr. Kennedy through NOBSHE, so she's definitely a valuable connection that I've made. So they have a conference, usually an annual conference once a year. And one of the biggest things is what do you call that? The 3-day thing with all the tables. What do you call those?
A career fair?
There we go. The career fair. And like Dr. Kennedy said, she got recruited there. So a lot of the times they recruit you on the spot. So if you came prepared and ready to talk, and like we said, have your elevator pitches ready, go there, talk, give those elevator pitches, and then you would never know, you might end up with a job before you leave. So
Thank you for that. Dr. Sanchez?
Hello, good morning. My name is Maria Sanchez, and I am currently the Director of Education and Outreach in the College of Engineering and Information Technology at UMBC. My story of how I got here is very, very long. And parts of it I will tell you later if we had the time, but I studied my undergrad in Colombia, South America in mechanical engineering. I was coming from a very small town to the capital, and I was in a private university in Bogota. I have always been sort of an outsider because of that. A lot of people in there have already their cliques and their groups. And so it was hard from the beginning to be part of being a bigger city, a bigger community and all that. But I enjoyed being away from home, and I was very young at the time. I graduated after 5 years. So in Colombia, at that time, to get a professional degree, you had to go to school for 5 years. But in addition to that, I took a year off to come to the United States because my father was doing his PhD late in his career. And I came with the intention of learning English during that year. So that delayed my graduation a little bit. I take it back. I graduated in 6 years because of that. After I graduated, because of a connection that I made while I was here in the United States with my family, I met a professor that was very impressed about the fact that I was trying to learn English and trying to blend in and all that. So I took his class, and I sat in his class to try to learn the terminology, and it was a thermodynamics class. So it happens that he had a lab in, this is Virginia Tech. He has a lab in Virginia Tech in thermal radiation, and the area that I was very interested from the beginning was the thermal fluids part of mechanical engineering. So when I graduated, he offered me a scholarship or assistantship really to do research in his lab. And that's how I ended up coming to graduate school. To tell you the truth, much of a decision at the time, I didn't have a job, and these guys offered me a full ride. So there is in another country. So I decided to come to the United States to pursue my master's degree immediately after I graduated with my undergrad. So similar to Dr. Vaughn, I went through the entire thing. While I was doing my master's, my intention was to get my master's in 2 years and go back to Colombia because I am very, very Colombian. I'm very Hispanic, and I very enjoy different aspects of it. And my intention was to go back to it. But he asked me to, as soon as I graduated, or when I was about to graduate, he asked me if I wanted to go and teach in Puerto Rico. At that time, he had an interchange program with a university in Puerto Rico. So it was the opportunity to go and teach in Spanish for the first time and live in Puerto Rico. I couldn't say no again. Again, it was no brainer. So I went there and I taught thermodynamics for 2 semesters. And I really, really enjoyed it, and I really loved it. And it could be just because it was Puerto Rico or because it was in Spanish, I don't know. But that's when I decided that I wanted to teach as my career, in my career. So he said, if you want to stay, I would let you stay to get your PhD. And And my motivation was really be able to go back to the classroom and teach. So I did I think it took me 4 years after that. I cannot remember now anymore, but I did research in radiometers, that are devices that measure radiation through space, that are put in satellites looking at the Earth, and then they measure the radiation that the Earth emits and whatever is reflected back from the sun. With the idea of that project was to create something that is called an Earth radiation budget that could be associated, or it is associated, with climate change. So it was a very interesting research, but as I said, my motivation was really teaching. So after I graduated with my PhD, I went to a university that was mostly teaching university, which means that the graduate program was very, very small. They only had master's students, and the main focus was teaching. I was in a tenure track position, but I realized that my research was hurting because my focus was more on teaching. So I decided to not continue that path of getting tenure as a research person, but more than anything become a full-time lecturer or a full-time teaching faculty. And that's, at that moment, there was another, my husband and I decided that I forgot to mention that my first job was in California. We were in California, but we met in Virginia Tech. We really liked the East Coast, so we decided to move back this way. And that's how I ended up at UMBC. My husband got a job at APL, the Applied Physics Lab from Johns Hopkins. And I started looking for jobs. At the time, I had never heard of UMBC, so I apologize for that, because I didn't even know it existed. But I found a position at UMBC working with transfer students initially, and then I got into the mechanical engineering department to work as a lecturer. After 4 years doing that, I was asked by a group in College Park to join their lab, which is the lab with, it was a lab called Engineering for Social Change. And I was really interested at that point in something like that. So I went and worked with them for a year. We wrote a book on electronic waste at the moment, but the idea was to educate engineering students about their social responsibility as engineers. And so that's what I'm trying to focus on right now, in addition to improve my skills in teaching and helping other people that are interested in engineering education develop techniques to teach to our engineers. Right now, fortunately, my position allows me to do that among a lot of other administrative things that I had to be involved with as part of the dean's office. But that's pretty much the story that I have.
Wonderful. So I'm just going to pose a few questions one at a time. And really, I'll allow the speakers to just speak up if they would like to go. But if that doesn't work, then I can start calling specific speakers to, I know it can be difficult sometimes on the electronics or on Zoom meetings. So first question would be, what personal qualities or abilities have been most important to being successful within your field?
I can start since I just finished, if that's okay. Because I think I feel a little bit related to this in the sense that one thing that I believe helped me, at least personally, is being flexible and don't be scared when things change, I think. Is very good, and this is again my personal experience, is very good to have a goal in life, but at the same time recognize that this goal may transform. And so for me, it was very important to be able to be flexible. I always thought that I was going to work in industry as an engineer, and then I found something else that I was more passionate about, so I was able to be flexible and move with that. So that is something that if I say something about me, is that flexibility had helped me greatly to get where I am. So I wanted to say that.
Okay, and I'm going to build on Maria. I agree. I think it's very important to be able to pivot to be able to change and not be rigid. And I think one of the terms that we're saying now is to have a growth mindset, being able to learn and change. So I agree with that. And another thing specific to me is I'm an optimist. I'm a cheerleader, and I don't have any problems with being a cheerleader. And I think that's one of the things that has helped me to stay sane and to try to always to be happy and to look for the bright spots in any situation. So I think that's a personal thing that characterizes me. And I'll be honest with one thing, this COVID thing was the thing that probably has been the most challenging in my life in terms of remaining positive, but we're getting through it.
Dr. Kennedy, I was going to lead off of that, so I won't repeat. All those are part of me too, but especially with COVID and even thinking back to when I was in grad school, resilience is one that stands true and true. Being willing to see the experiments not working. What I didn't talk about was the fact that I had done some computational work for my PhD, and it was not necessarily my strong suit. And learning how to code. If I told you the language, you would say, oh my goodness, she is literally a dinosaur. But that's not the point. I did it and it was not working, and continuing to make sure that I didn't give up. So resilience to knowing that, it may seem like people have the power. For me, my faith has kept me going, even though if it feels like, you don't have the control when you defend, this is in the power of someone else's hand, but everything happens for a reason. And looking at it from that perspective, we all have to learn and grow from all the experiences. So resilience.
So I agree with everything that's said. The piece about, the growth mindset is interesting, because I was just talking with my husband the other day, and having that intellectual curiosity, I think, is really important. You might have seen in my career, I've switched around quite a bit, going from private sector to federal government to academia. So really big career shifts, but always curious and, trying to learn. And in talking with him, I don't think I had that same curiosity actually in undergrad. So if you don't feel like you have it right now, that's okay. I think it was really about, I'm trying to get through this class, and when I look back at my transcript, I'm like, I took physics 3 and calculus 3, what? So you really are just kind of going through the motions, but as you grow and mature within your career, really trying to have that intellectual curiosity, because I think that's going to help you to be a better problem solver, because you're really, concerned about, well, what is this here and how do I get it right? And you'll be more able to adapt to different situations and have conversations with a variety of people. So I think that intellectual curiosity is important. And then I'll say, I think another trait is that I work hard, but I play hard too. So I really dig in hard. I'm a really hard worker, but I also love having fun and having that balance. So when I was at UMBC, I was a dance minor. When I was in graduate school, I was part of a dance company for a little bit. And, I like to have fun. So I think that that's helpful. I think being kind of true to yourself in your personal sense, as well, as that doesn't conflict with you being a good scientist or engineer. And so, just keeping that balance is important.
I appreciate that. Dr. Wayman talked about fun, and Dr. Vaughn talked about spirituality, but so a few of you have touched on how you're very positive people. But how do you maintain that positivity when you're met with these different obstacles? I guess is something I would add and ask you to maybe talk a little bit more on, because there are sometimes things where it feels out of our control of, controlling. How do you maintain your sense of validation, your sense that, to trust in the path you're on when you're met with these different obstacles or adversity in the workforce?
I guess we could go back in reverse order and then Sharon, if you want to. Very good question. And I will tell you that I was not, I had my challenges going through. In fact, you mentioned Nobishe, it made me think about NSBE, that I kind of the same type of professional organization. And when I was getting my PhD, I was at a point where I was done the master's portion. So I was like, I'm out of here. I'm quitting. And went to a NSBE conference and interviewed, I think it was at McKinsey, and they offered me a job. So I was like, I am out of here, but they offered it to me on the spot at NSBE. And so I think that in those times of challenge, you're right, you do need someone to affirm for you, like why you're here. I mean, I leaned a lot on my faith and had to do some searching as to why am I really getting this PhD, so you kind of go back to like your initial intent of what you're trying to do and the purpose of what you're trying to do. So that's what helped me get through is that leaning on my faith and leaning on trusted people. So you need other people that know you well and can affirm for you, and even kind of give you that. They're not just saying go, 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 but you know that they're going to love you unconditionally either way, but they give you that encouragement to know that you can do it. So I definitely had that along the way. So those are my points there.
I can't remember if I'm supposed to go next. Maybe so. So the one of the things that, as I've gotten older, I think I'm getting more comfortable with just being who I am. And it's been a long journey, because I've been a Christian for many years. And I think even when I started at ExxonMobil in 2005, I wouldn't say it. There's this whole inclusion and diversity aspect of when you're in industry or even in school. I don't know, at campus, probably a little freer because you have so many different groups and everything. But even just being able to say that and not have a concern about whether I'm going to offend someone or, well, should I say it or not say it? I was in a phase there. But that is what actually got me through. So having the willpower and the know to pray and to go to trusted advisors, like Dr. Wayman said, really is where it came to. When it got really rough during some of the PhD, I needed to go talk to people, professional talking, like, let me go just see a therapist, just talk this out. Not to say I was going crazy or anything, but sometimes you need a third party to just help bring perspective. And, knowing that we're all good enough, each of you are good enough, more than enough. And really getting that ingrained in your whole heart and soul is really important. I've been at the company for 15 years. I forgot to say that. So I've been with the same company since graduating, and different opportunities, just like Dr. Kennedy. And, there's been an opportunity along the way where you have to self-reflect and say, okay, am I going to present myself as myself, or continue to try to, even Dr. Sanchez mentioned it, trying to fit in, and what's the right way. And it's just being yourself, understanding there's a professional aspect of it, but being yourself, knowing when you are in a tough time, reaching out to people. But I wanted to at least just share some of that it is not going to be easy. My reason for getting the PhD was probably not as deep as some, because people just said, Nicole, go ahead and get it. You could get it. They said, they're giving you the money. Go ahead and get it. So it wasn't like I'm going to change the world. But then I said, if I'm going to be Dr. Vaughn, actually Dr. Dingle, because my maiden name is Dingle, I said, they can't take that away. And who's they? The world can't take it. So what's your motivation for doing something and being willing to see it through to the end, and knowing how to tap into things that are available to you, resources, internal drive, faith, whatever that is, but really just making a decision that this is what I'm going to do no matter what comes in front of me. So I just wanted to share that.
Okay, so, and I'm going to add on, I'm going to think in terms of three things. The first one is I try not to have people that are negative around me. I try, sometimes it does happen, but it's always good to have people rooting for you. So wherever I am, from graduate school throughout, I always try to find a group of people that help to lift me up. So that's one thing. The second thing is I always like to have something to look forward to. So if I'm at a bad point in my career, then I try to make sure there's something in my personal life or something to help somebody else, just something else to look forward to, so that I'm not singularly focused at this one thing that might not be going well at the time. So always multiple things that I'm actually trying to be involved in, and always helping somebody else helps lift you up. And the last thing I'm going to say is I'm building on Dr. Vaughn. In the last couple of years, I've gotten really more focused on meditation and going internally, and trying not to be so focused externally on what everybody else is thinking, and really understanding who I am, learning who I am, and loving all of my capabilities and loving the person that I am. And so that's really one of the things in terms of battling every day with the industry life that's really helped me be positive over these last few years.
Interesting. It's hard for me to answer that question, actually, because I don't know exactly what is the thing that always made me go forward. I knew that I wanted to teach, so that was definitely my motivation to get my PhD, for example, and that was definitely a very strong one. But obviously, like everybody's saying, there were really bad times when I doubt myself and doubt my abilities. I think what helped me a lot was, again, being an outsider, you create your own group of outsiders. And so we were, in Virginia Tech, the international community was very large, or is, I believe, very large, and that helped me a lot. We had friends, or I had friends from everywhere in the world that were going through similar situations, that I was being away from home. The challenges, the academic challenges that are very large, or they look very large at the moment. And then that group of people really, really helped me in these bad moments. I like the idea of another thing that I did, similar to what Dr. Kennedy was saying, that the looking forward to something. So I always keep everything in perspective. That helped me a lot. So thinking that if I didn't pass this test, or if I failed this class, it's not the end of the world. Even if I didn't get my PhD, there would be something else that I could probably enjoy. So kind of sort of a plan B, and looking at the positives of that plan B, but always thinking that as long as you're alive, you have your family, your friends, things will work out in some way or another. If for some reason you find a roadblock, think about yourself in 5 years or 10 years, whether that path was meant to actually be cut, or maybe not, just where you were supposed to overcome that roadblock. So there is always the perspective idea. And looking back, I wish I had taken things a little bit less seriously sometimes, and being a little bit less stressed about little details like a test, like a homework, like stuff like that, and start and realize that, yeah, there is a bigger picture here. And that bigger picture is that you are who you are, like someone was saying too, recognize who you are, and somewhere or another, you will be able to contribute, even if you had that degree or not. And it's true that a degree gives us a lot of peace, and like Dr. Vaughn was saying, which is very important, no one will take it away from us. There is still other ways that we can contribute to society, not necessarily, there's not always one path, that's what I'm trying to say. So that keeping that in mind, and with the help of my friends, they help me saying the same things over and over. I think that's what made me move forward every time that I encountered a problem.
Thank you for that. So do any of you use any of your graduate training in your job, and if so, how?
We're gonna go in the other order now. Okay. Yes and no. There are, and I think you have heard this, the technical knowledge that you gain, and all of you are probably thinking about this, when am I gonna use this triple integral? When am I gonna use this concept, stuff like that. That technical training that you learn is a way, as a vehicle for you to learn how to learn. And I think a lot of people have told you that. So the training that I went through with my classes helped me in later jobs. not necessarily remembering the equations, the radiation equations that will measure whatever. It was more about the ability of discovering something and learning by myself. So that part of the training I definitely still use. I'm comfortable if I encounter a problem to look at the resources, to ask the right person, how can you help me with that? So that training was definitely useful. And then the other, in more specific, the other training that was very helpful is how to write. For me, it was very difficult, obviously, because I was learning the language and everything, but being able to write first a thesis for your master's and then a dissertation and papers and all that, that training stays with you a lot. So, and it's helping me in my new job. It's very particular for my position, I guess. I had to write grants sometimes, or I had to communicate in a technical way. So that part definitely I use a lot, and I learned it all through graduate school. I don't think I did much in undergrad, but I definitely learned all the way through graduate school. So that specific skill is something that I definitely learned and that I still use. The other ones, the technical, like I said, technical part of it, I don't use it as much in my position right now, but the soft skills, they're not supposed to be called soft skills anymore, but those skills that we learn as a student are definitely very important, and be able to learn. So those are the things that I still use.
Okay, and I'm going to build, I think graduate school teaches you to think, it teaches you how to solve problems, and those things are important wherever you go. It also teaches you to be resilient and have grit. And so if you're working in an industry situation, you definitely need those. And I think you need grit wherever you are also. And then one thing I think graduate school teaches and people don't realize, because usually when people come to industry, they want to lead a team, they want to be a manager, they want to, you know, start off leading the company. That doesn't often happen. But one thing graduate school teaches you to be is to be a leader, because I think it teaches you how to lead yourself, and you can't really lead other people until you learn how to lead yourself. So I've seen people with graduate degrees and without, and typically, or most often, people with graduate degrees know how to lead projects coming out of the gate a little bit faster, where other people would have to learn how to do that. And they learn how to lead, they know how to lead teams a little bit quicker than somebody without that graduate school experience. So those are the things that I think it teaches you that are not specifically related to the science that you're learning. I will say this, that you still have to be technical. You still have to be able to execute regardless. So do not take the technical part for granted, because it's a given. It's the thing that gets you in the door.
Not to repeat anything, I'm in agreement with all that was said. I think an addition would be in the roles that I've had, being able to read through and read through a whole lot of information as you're doing research and reading articles. And right now it's not research articles. Earlier in the career, it might have been research articles if we wanted to tie something into the product development. But even now in the role I'm in, taking the news from different sources and helping to be able to translate that to business insights and what needs to come from it. So data download, digesting, clarifying it, and speaking to it. I think you have to do that in graduate school. And I'm still using that one today, even not in and out of work. So
I agree with everything said. I just wanted to use this question to also throw out there that if you decide to continue in academic research or research at another institution after graduate school, then certainly you will use your training. And, while you don't hear, a lot of us ended up leaving research within an academic institution, I think that there's a lot of opportunity there, more than what I knew at the time. Similar to what one of the other panelists said, I was really looking to see how I could use my technical degree to have societal impact. And that's what led me to go from graduate school to the private sector, where I could be more hands-on with the products going into doctors' hands, the federal government. That's driven my career. But I also learned particularly when I went to federal government, how much research is done out there that has really high impact. You know, when you look at like translational science research, for example, that's kind of like that last mile of biomedical research, could sometimes be called clinical research. There's a lot of opportunity there for high impact with the work that you're doing. And so sometimes I wonder, had I known about those types of research projects, would I have stayed in academic research? So if you go into those career paths, you'll absolutely use all of it, including the technical part of your graduate work. And I think that's growing more and more because students, probably like a lot of you on here, are looking for those research opportunities. And so professors and departments are really pivoting. And you heard even Dr. Sanchez talk about, you know, engineering for societal impact in these new centers that are being created to do work, and a lot of research that's being done internationally and looking at, you know, how do we help with malaria and water challenges. So there's a lot of awesome research out there that if you decide to stay in research, you can have huge, huge impact.
Dr. Wayman, can you elaborate on what translational sciences means?
Sure. So translational science is a term that's been around for a while, but being used more prominently around how do you take great scientific discoveries that are in the lab and actually translate them into a product that is helping people. And so, you know, when you look at insulin for diabetes, for example, you know, all the research that was done around, you know, insulin and the mechanism of the disease, that was 10, 20, 30 years of research that then finally was able to turn that into a product. We're seeing this right now with COVID. So, you know, fortunately, there's a lot known about the disease, and fortunately, they had the code, the genetic code as well to put a head start on that. But there's a lot of work that still needs to be done around that in terms of, you know, how do we manufacture it, clinical trials data. There's a lot around making sure the quality of the product can be maintained appropriately. So a lot of the work is done at a company. That's really the development part of the product. But then you do have some research institutes, about a dozen translational science research centers that are also looking more from the clinical aspect once we understand more about a potential solution to this disease. They're now working in clinics and working with community populations to see how we can now roll this out to be a viable product or intervention. It could be public health intervention that can really help people. So in short, I say it's kind of like applied biotechnology in a way, but you're more learning about how to make the biotechnology product versus what it is.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So what have been the most rewarding aspects of your experiences, and what have been the most challenging aspects?
I guess I can go, or okay, I'll go. So the most rewarding, I work for Colgate, so it's a consumer products company. And so seeing something that you think in your mind and you see it on the shelf and people buying it, I think it's always lovely. Another thing, as I progressed, I help other people. So seeing other people grow is also very rewarding for me. And then the company I work for is also multinational. So just meeting a lot of people from different cultures is also a way that I've grown a lot over the past 18 years. The things that have been most challenging for me is, so you have to look around and see how things are going. So you have to actually read the corporation and figure out how to adapt as the person you are. It's not really challenging, but it's something you probably don't learn in grad school as much. And so it's something that I've had to do in corporate America to figure out where to fit in, not just to fit in, but also to progress and to continue to be promoted in the organization. And another thing that I've had to do is to stay relevant. So, I mean, sometimes you can work on things and you can get lost. They might be important to you, but not to the business. So, and if it's not important to the business, then it's just going to get lost and nobody cares. So always staying relevant throughout a long career and not over the short terms. So those are the things for me that have been both rewarding and challenging.
Dr. Kennedy, have you always had a international mind, or is that something that developed over time?
Actually, I think I grew up in a small town in South Carolina, so definitely not always. I went to school in North Carolina, so not very far away. But when I went to graduate school, I had an amazing advisor, and I think after my first 6 months, he sent me to Canada, then he sent me to Switzerland. He sent me like all over the world, and from then, I did have an international mind. And working at Colgate was one of the reasons I accepted the job, was the opportunity to work different places. So I've been a lot of places in Colgate. So definitely completely international. Now I don't actually know where my home is anymore.
And then I'll just ask you to elaborate on what you meant earlier about, you said opportunity over safety or stability maybe.
Right. So when I started out in one group, right? And I had the opportunity to just stay in that group and grow over a period of time. But then I got an opportunity to go into toothbrushes, and no other chemist per se went into toothbrushes. So it was kind of risky because you're going off of the beaten path, but it was an amazing experience. And then ever since then, it's been like, do you want to go to Mexico? Sure. You know, that's not the most safest thing to think coming from the US, that yes, you want to go to Mexico and you've never been there before. And so I'm like, if there's an opportunity, yes, I'll take it. And thinking about, you know, what's safe and comfortable last. And I've always seen that when I've been the most uncomfortable, I've had the most growth. So now I tend to be in those situations where I feel a little bit like maybe I can't do it, you know, instead of being very comfortable, like, yes, I can easily breeze through this job. So I kind of stay away from things like that and more so go for things that I consider will stretch me some.
I don't want to repeat anything, but I'm going to definitely connect with Dr. Kennedy, because as I sit and listen to her, it's like, am I listening to myself? Like, she's saying things that I would say. So we should definitely connect. Even all the doctors here, you guys are awesome. What was I going to say? You said what I was going to say. That's what I'm like, okay, I'm not even going to say it. What else? Okay. The challenge, the rewarding part was the same. You know, when I joined the company, I think one of the rewarding parts that I remember, the reason why I chose it is still true, and that's going back to schools and talking and helping to go in and share what engineering is. And this is, you know, middle school, elementary school. So I've had the opportunity to go to my kids' schools and share, you know, this as a science ambassador, this is what, and open up the eyes of the younger generation as to what science and technology and engineering is. That's been really rewarding. The travel and helping others. The challenging part, as Dr. Kennedy said, was, you know, when it's been difficult, I think for me, not knowing what the future holds has always been a challenge for me. I kind of like to plan and know, and sometimes we won't know, regardless of probably what organization you're in. You don't know what the full picture is. Even today, like yesterday, I was like, well, what is my purpose? You know, I'm thinking about that even, you know, today and each day. So not knowing the future, but doing the best I can with each day given, and not focusing or worrying. Right now I'm sitting in Houston, but my job is in China. I can worry about that, but I'm choosing to not, and just do the best I can with the situation we've been given. But it's not easy. It's a daily, consistent meditation, exercising, and just refocusing every day. I think that's been one of the most challenging. The role has been even one of the most challenging, because China is very much different than the United States of America. So it's been a really good opportunity though, so.
All right, I think it's my turn. I'm sorry, Dr. Wayne, you wanna go first? Okay. The rewarding, it's for me, since I chose to go into education and teaching engineering students mostly, I had to say that it still makes my day when I see a good student evaluation. So if I get, and nowadays students don't reply as much as we used to have because it's online, but if I get 20 replies and most of them are positive, it is definitely a huge reward for me. It shows that the care that I put into and the thoughts that I put into the class, it actually worked, even if it was just for those 20 students. Like I said, it makes my day. It's and my week and my month probably. It's definitely a very rewarding experience. And same thing when I hear from someone that I have mentored, when they say, you know, it was a good advice that you gave me at that time. Recently, I just heard from a girl a woman from College Park. The year that I was there, I was able to teach a class, and she replied out of the blue. She sent me an email saying, if it wasn't because of your encouragement to go to graduate school, I wouldn't be where I am right now. And that is definitely still very, very rewarding for me. It doesn't get better than that for me, than anything else in career-wise. Challenges, even though I hear those good successes from some students or those good stories, the main challenge for me is overcome my lack of confidence. I'm very still insecure, and it's because it could be for many reasons, but one of the reasons that I think is because I'm becoming like someone that is not from here or there. I have almost spent the same amount of time in this country that I spend in my country, my original country. So it still feels like I'm going against the flow most of the time. I cannot tell you how long it takes me to write an email, for example. I always second guessing my grammar, are they getting the idea? Being also socially distanced or actually virtual has made it very difficult for me because I count a lot of my expressions, and you can see how I move my hands and I laugh and everything. Is because I count on those expressions to get the message across. And I cannot do that most of the time. So that lack of confidence is my biggest challenge, is be able to overcome those insecurities. And I don't know how I can get it. I'm almost 50 years old and I still have those insecurities, and I don't know if I will ever live without it. So that is definitely my biggest challenge. And I knew it was gonna be like that once I made the decision to stay here. I knew that I was gonna feel like this, but it doesn't make it easier. So being that outsider has its pros and cons. And I think this is definitely one of the cons, is the fact that I feel like I'm not belonging. That's I want to say. And I know probably the experience is different for everybody, but that's my own personal experience.
Did how you process those insecurities change throughout your life? Like, do you feel like they have less of a impact on you, or at least when you feel those feelings coming, you know how to respond to them in a positive way?
Yeah, that's a good question. There are several times when, let's say, for example, in a meeting, I don't feel comfortable speaking up because, again, I say people are not going to understand what I'm saying, or maybe I'm not saying correctly. One thing that I keep trying to remind myself is that I'm in this position right now where people like me are fewer, and that I have a value. I have something to contribute. So I keep reminding myself that even if the grammar is not correct in a message, I want people to hear what I have to say in any way, because I believe that my point of view is relevant. And so I keep reminding myself of that, and just, again, thinking of the big picture. I'm in this position for a reason. I had gone through several things. I got here. I hope it's not because of the diversity hire or anything like that, but more because of my strengths. So I try to remind myself of that, and I try to overcome that fear of maybe not being correct in a lot of things, because I think the message is important. So, and then again, I have a wonderful husband that reminds me all the time that, you know, this is my place. I have friends, again, that are very supportive. And so I go to them when I'm starting to feel a little bit more insecure, and that helps. But definitely it's just to remind you that we have worked hard. And like I said before, we all have something to contribute. And it is important that we let people know what we think, and that our voice is valued, because it is important to have those different perspectives all the time.
Dr. Sanchez made a whole bunch of thoughts run through my head, but taking the trail around the confidence issue, I think that's still, I mean, I think that challenge resonates for me as well. And, you know, when I finished graduate school, I felt so beat up that, you know, even going into my first job, which was a very cutthroat environment at the time as well, that there was still this confidence issue that I was struggling with. And then, you know, one day it just clicked, you know, that, wow, I am good enough and I can roll with this. But I think, you know, again, with the shifts that I've made, these big shifts in my career, I tend to walk myself into things that I have never done before, and I'm, you know, being responsible to lead it. And so that still causes sometimes a confidence challenge, you know, in trying to make sure that, you know, in kind of that self-talk that I'm good enough. And like you said, also leaning on, again, this is where friends come into play. The people who you are with right now can be your networks and your support system when you're older. So my friends from UMBC, we have a chat, you know, a GroupMe chat, and we're talking on our GroupMe chat if we had, you know, something bad happen at work, and we're like, you got this, you know, and we're cheering each other on. So, you know, make your networks now, because these can be your lifelong support systems as you go through your career, and maybe having doubts here and there, or someone talked to you in the wrong way and you're like, was that wrong or not wrong? Should I be offended? Or, you know, that's your sounding board. You're developing your sounding board now. So I think that it's important. But, you know, as you go through, you'll realize that, you know, what you have to bring is, Dr. Sanchez said, is enough. And you are in that position, whatever it is, for a reason. Probably the greatest reward is just seeing the product of your work. For me, you know, I was at USAID for 8 years, so that's probably what I probably will speak on the most. But having a chance to, kind of in a way to what Dr. Sanchez spoke, giving opportunities to scientists because they had the talent. They may not have the resources, but they had the talent. And so they're trying to solve these grand challenges was important. And so for us to be able to fund them and see what they were able to do with the resources we provided was really rewarding, as well as being able to travel to all the different countries, to Indonesia, and Cambodia, Vietnam, Ghana, Tanzania. It's just so eye-opening to see all these through the countries that I was able to travel to in that was really, really rewarding. So, and just to see, you know, different cultures is really, to me, was like really fascinating. So, yeah, I think those were the rewarding parts. But in general, when you see the fruits of your labor and whatever the purpose is that you sought out to do within your work, and you see that actually achieved, that's the greatest reward.
Thank you for that. I really appreciate all the speakers talking about their desire to give back to the next generation in the role of mentorship and teaching. I think it's really important for us to realize that though it, you know, we phrase it or we frame it as service, we also get a lot back from that experience, whether it's learning or just a sense of giving back. So just letting all the students know about that, really appreciate that. I also heard a lot about all these great opportunities all around the world, all around the country, but how do you balance taking advantage of opportunities as well as family or personal responsibilities?
So yeah, that's a good, I mean, you definitely need a good support network to be able to do all that. I don't know, I probably shouldn't have gone first, but just to give you a little bit of background about my personal obligation. So I, you know, been married for years. My husband actually is a UMBC alum as well, so that's where we met, and we went to grad school together. So when you talk about support system, he was definitely a strong support system for me. And we have 3 kids, 15-year-old, a 10-year-old, and a 7-year-old. So it's definitely challenge balancing it all. When I first started working at USAID, my second son was, yeah, well, when I applied, so when I was working at BD, I was there about 4 years. Every once in a while, I'll just get like something rise up in my gut that's like, it's time for change now. So I got that. So there's a fellowship program called the American Association for the Advancement of Science. And they basically provide opportunities for PhD level scientists to work in the federal government for 1 to 2 years. You're not guaranteed a job on the other side, and this was during the recession. But I said, I had been looking at the opportunity and said, hey, I want to do this, leave my nice stable job. I'm pregnant with our second son, but I want to go do this opportunity. And so once I landed the job, I was, he was about a year old, maybe 7 months old when I started the job. But, you know, we have family in the area. So I think that helped, you know, if I was to travel, that was helpful to have them here. And my husband being supportive to say that I'm willing to take this journey with you and do whatever it takes. When I had my third son, you know, I cut back on travel a little bit and waited until he was old enough to travel again. So I think you do have to balance, you know, what are your career goals and what's the support structure you need to do it. And so maybe it is being closer to family, or maybe it is, if you're not close to family, I'm going to build a network within, you know, wherever I am of friends that can help me through this. It could be that if it's a job that you're making enough money, okay, I need to get some external help here, you know, as it relates to a nanny or something like that. But if you're going to be getting paid big bucks, it could be you have the means to do it and it's worth it. So I think it's a really good question that you have to think, and we're reevaluating all the time, even now, of just like, even in the context of COVID, schools are online right now. So how am I going to balance my job with my husband's job and 3 kids that are now going to be learning virtually? So we're right now trying to reshuffle things and brainstorm. You know, we're both engineers, so we have a whole flow chart going on of like brainstorming options to figure out, you know, what does that look like so that we can balance it all. So it's a good question, something that you're going to be kind of like continuing to evolve as you grow in your career.
So I'll go next. So I don't have any kids, but I've been married last week for 20 years, so for a long time. And I guess since I started my career, balance for me has always been an individual thing, because I think it's very personal. Like, some people can take on more and some people can take on less. And so I've always thought, for me, balance is not like how much I have, but it's how happy I am. So I've done some crazy things, and I am glad I've had a supportive husband. So for 13 years at Colgate, I actually commuted 3 hours to work, and my husband worked at Morgan in Maryland. And it was a decision I made, because I was not going to be happy with a job in DC, which are more government. I knew I couldn't handle. I like more pace. So that was a choice that I made. And so it was stressful, but that kind of balance was better for me than versus having an easier commute and being home. Also, I thought about opportunities. So when I went to Europe for an assignment for 6 months, my husband did not go with me. And again, it was about me having this opportunity and the benefit of that versus being together. Of course, we spent a lot of money to come together, but I still made that decision. And then when I went to Mexico, we had to make a decision together, because he was closer to the end of his career, and I'm like, I'm going to do this. What do you want to do? So for me, balance is about being happy. And like you said, Dr. Lehman, making sure that you have the support in place to help you with those decisions that you ultimately make.
I didn't know if you wanted to go next, Dr. Sanchez, but I'll go. My husband and I met at College Park, And when I went to Purdue, we had to do a long distance relationship. So, some people say long distance doesn't work, but that was a good 3 years of long distance. And when the interviews he was working in the DC area, but when I interviewed to come out of school, I mean, there were like 7 job offers. This was before the recession. This was 2005. It was really good, like 7 different job offers. And the decision to go with ExxonMobil was a joint one. We were not married at that time. We knew we were going to get married. So I think in choosing your life partner, you have to know, kind of going in what you're willing to accept, what you're getting into. Like, be honest with the desires of your heart, because had we not had discussions up front, we probably would run into some confusion towards the later part, because we've moved a couple of different times throughout my career, haven't changed companies, but different opportunities in the US. This is the first international one. And in all of them, at one point, he decided to start his own business because both of us working in a corporate environment was going to be probably too much. So, but it was always his dream to have his own business. Engineer too, so 2 engineers. And the kids, our children at this point are pretty, once again, I like the word resilient. They're pretty resilient. You can put them in different scenarios, locations, and they can make the most of it. When my daughter hits high school, we may have to taper it a bit, because we'd like them to stay in high school for, the full 4 years. At least that's what I signed on the paper with my husband, like, we won't move. So once again, not knowing the future is my challenge. But in any case, I think just being upfront and finding and working with the person that you're with, so that it's clear, how are we going to make this work? That's kind of the way we've been doing it, and prayer, of course.
It seems to me that there is a pattern, and when you go to graduate school, you find your partner. So there is a message for everybody here.
We met in undergrad, Dr. Sanchez.
Oh, okay. Well,
Same, undergrad.
A lot of years.
Oh,
a lot
goodness.
of years.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I was
but the message is the same. Go to grad school.
I 2 things that I want to kind of repeat, because I think they're important. I think what Dr. Kennedy said, that balance is something very personal. It's incredible how much you read articles about what is work balance and everything. And then it all comes down to the fact that it's what makes you happy. And that balance is so really personal. For some people, it works very well that they decide to work less time and spend more time with the family. For others, it's the opposite. So there is there is not really a scale. It's something very, very personal, where it's whatever works for you. So I wanted to send a message, because I don't want everybody to think that you have to be 50% at home, 50% at work, or anything like that. You just find what works for you and your partners and your family. And then the other part that I wanted to emphasize is what Dr. Vaughn was saying. Finding the right partner is very important. I didn't realize what the implications of my decision was when I decided to stay here. The fact that I wasn't going to have a family to be supportive of me and my family. Our parents, my husband's parents live in California, mine live still in Colombia. We don't have any extended family around here. It's only the 2 of us. So when I was lucky, I had to say, because I didn't think about it this very straight, but I was lucky that I found the person that was willing to go with me in the journey, like Dr. Vaughn was saying, but also to be flexible with me. So we were not we didn't butt heads much in that, because we were clear in what we wanted in the future. I had 2 sons too. One is 13, the other one is 10. And we had shared the responsibilities very equally. I sometimes feel like he has done more than I have in the family front. But he was willing to go with me. And if it wasn't because we had the conversation and because we are in the same page, I don't know if we would still be married, because it was really, really tough once kids came. It was so hard to be alone and having to deal with the issues of having babies. Also engineer, I was gonna say another pattern right here. My husband is also an engineer, also a mechanical engineer. We actually were working together in the lab. So we were able to know each other for a long time before we decided to go out or date. And that made a huge difference for us. So make sure that you know the person that you'll be with, that you're thinking about forming a family. It is very important that you're on the same page because things get complicated and you need that person next to you to move with you as you have to move. So I wanted to reiterate those things.
And sometimes we're not so explicit in saying it. So I do want to say that there were some common themes that did come across all these great doctors, which was that they found a partner who was open to communication, who was flexible, and also compassionate. So those are, it seems like some different personality attributes that you're looking for when you are looking for a partner. You know, of course, you also want someone who may be ambitious and, you know, may have some goals, but it sounds like all those together is what really made a strong partnership for you all.
I saw a question in the chat too about the balance of flexibility and compromise. And I'm guessing that means like, when do you flex your career versus not, you know, versus compromising your career? I think it's really, there's no easy answer really to that. I think it's a case by case situation. But oftentimes there is more one way, there's more than one way forward in whatever you're trying to do. And so, you know, if this one pathway is going to cause your spouse to really have to flex in a way that's just not, you know, feasible for them, or really like this is their highest priority, they just can't do it, then there might be another pathway forward for you to kind of achieve a similar goal. And so maybe trying to figure that out. An example for me would be, as part of this AAAS fellowship, they have an overseas fellowship that you can do following, where you spend 1 to 2 years at a mission in another country. So for me, I was like, oh, that would be great, you know? And, you know, from my kids' perspective, they would get a chance to live in another country for 1 to 2 years, but then we come back here. And, but then, and I thought for my husband, you know, but he's like, well, me leaving my company for a year or two, it would be hard to come back. Like there wouldn't be that same return for him. And I was like, well, you have a PhD, you could work at a university, da, da, da. He's like, but that's not what I want to do, you know? So for him, that 1 to 2 years would cause a huge gap forward for him in his career. And so it's like, makes sense, you know? And so, you know, the other way I can expose my kids to other cultures is, well, for one, what I bring back every time I traveled, and for us traveling as a family, you know, so I can achieve those same things. And then me, you know, maybe I couldn't stay in a country for 1 to 2 years, but I was still able to go travel, being DC based, travel to those other countries and see what was going on and learn about those other ecosystems. So that's an example of where I just had to, you know, pull back. That makes sense, because this would be really hard for you to recover from if we were to do this and find another way.
And I answered, I think flexibility is compromise. It's very rare where you get everything that you want. Things you might have this perfect image in your head, but it rarely works out where you get that in career, in life. So I think that is the art about flexibility. When you realize that you might lose this, but you will gain this in the end. I think that's really important. And in my career, that's one thing that I've seen. Like I wanted to go this direction, but it went this direction. But at the end, I'm at a much better place. So I think you have to be open-minded and be flexible in a relationship, in your career, to actually go further than you think. Because sometimes things that happen to you are probably better than the way you imagine that they would happen. So I think you have to be open to sometimes let life take its course.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Looking back on your career, what advice do you wish you were given while you were in college?
I can start if that's okay. I think, and I said this in other areas before, in other places, I wish I was more encouraged to participate in things outside classes. I didn't take advantage of that when I was in college, and I think I missed out on living that extracurricular experience that I think that nowadays the students do. So I wish someone would have told me, try to participate in these events outside, so because that would have given me a little bit of a break from my classes, and maybe the stress that I was telling you about would have been a little bit less if I had been participated in those different activities. And then I wish I had recognized sooner what I said at the beginning was the fact that there is a big picture here. And so I wouldn't have so many down times like I did. Like there was a time when I was depressed, and the importance, I think Dr. Vaughn mentioned this, important of talking to a therapist is it's very important that you have that opportunity. But I was at some point very depressed because things weren't going my way. And I wish I would have seen that there is, again, a bigger picture here, and that I had looked for help sooner. I think I had to tell you something. I enjoy immensely being at school. I cannot think of, first of all, I never left. So I went into it and I'm still in it. But one of the reasons is because I really enjoyed it. And especially graduate school. So I think I wish I had maybe even made it better if I had participated in some stuff outside just my studies. I wonder who else I would have met, and I wonder who other things I would have learned that was not just in engineering. So that's one thing that I wish I had done a better job at.
Okay, for me, I had 3 things again. I participated in grad school and in undergrad in different activities, but it was with people who were like me, who looked like me. And so it was like the same group. And what I find, building networks, it's so important. And even having the capability to build them with people who are not like you, who don't look like you. It's so important in the world. So that's one thing that I wish somebody would have told me to do, to figure out how to talk to different people and be comfortable with that. Also, especially when you're an undergrad and in grad school, you're like, oh gosh, I gotta get it done right now. And time is not running out. I mean, I know it has to end at some point, but you have time. You have time to explore, you have time to fail, you have time to get it wrong, you have time to get it right. So I wish I wouldn't have had the pressure, like you said, Dr. Sanchez, in undergrad and grad school that I felt, and to enjoy it a little bit more. And the last thing is, and mostly in college, and maybe sometimes in grad school, I wish somebody would have said, you are capable, you know, because sometimes you forget that. And in these degrees that you guys are in, when you made it this far, it's because you have ability. So I wish somebody would have said, you're capable. It might not be going well now, but you have everything it takes. And I really believe that we all have our individual talents. And especially in college and grad school, I think it's a time of shaping and showing you who you are. But at the end, we're all very capable. We all can handle whatever life gives us. So those are my 3 things.
I'll go next, Dr. Wayman. What was I going to say here? Constructive feedback. If someone would have told me, you know, things just started to give feedback outside of just, I need to get an A on this test, or, you know, the score from the tests or the report, but actually constructive feedback while we were in school, while I was in school, it probably would be helpful, because when you get into career, university, wherever, being able to know what areas you can work on and receiving it without being defensive is actually something that is very positive, because it'll show you what areas you're really strong at, but it'll also show how you're being perceived by others. And I don't think we get that enough in school, except for, what did I get on this test? Did I pass? You know, I was very much focused on grades. I mean, the advice that I did get early on grades, in that knowing that those grades will open the doors for scholarships. I mean, the number of fellowships and scholarships, simply because the GPA, granted, the leadership skills were balanced off as well, but those kind of are the they open doors and present opportunities. So really making sure your grades are up, getting a tutor. I did get one, even though I didn't need it. I had tutors. I'm just telling you some things that, yes, they were not necessarily told to me, but I did them. But the constructive feedback is one. The other one is knowing your passions and continuing to pursue them. You know, having little people that I am steward over now, and not pressuring them to be engineers is something that is a challenge. But, you know, just because I heard someone dancing, I danced too in school. And so finding the balance for your passions and the fact that you want to do science, and, you know, making sure your whole self is getting nurtured is something that I would make sure I told myself, my 19-year-old self, and that there is joy, finding the joy in the journey and not having so much pressure. That is one, because it is all a part of the process. You know, you go through different things, and it's not the end of the world. And to not take ourselves so seriously is probably one that I could have been told multiple times over.
I'll just add, I really like the one about the feedback. That's a really good one, to be able to take feedback without being offended and defensive. So thank you for that one, Dr. Vaughn. I will add that there is flexibility in your career. So I think sometimes there's a lot of weight put on, you know, I have to pick the right major and the right, you know, path for my career right now. And your pathway can take all kinds of, you know, turns and twists. And so, you know, go forward what you think is what you want to do right now. And that can change. So don't feel the pressure to have to make the perfect decision right now, is one. That said, I wish someone would have told me to do a little bit more career exploration, and taking some of these panels seriously that I was able to sit in on when I was an undergrad and probably was barely listening. But to take those career explorations seriously. I did it when I was in high school. You know, I went to go visit DuPont to see about engineering, and I did engineering programs and all that stuff. But then in undergrad, I think, you know, and probably because I was at Meyerhoff, it was really more focused on, you know, I did research programs. So I thought research was interesting, but I didn't look beyond research in grad school to see kind of what I wanted to do. And I think that would have helped me to be more content in graduate school, more focused in graduate school. And when I hit those bumps in the road, been more confident that, you know, there's something on the other end of this that's really of interest to me. And so let me fight through these challenges. And like I said earlier, I had no idea about all the different types of research, all the different ways a career could go if you stay in research. And so, you know, doing more, you know, Engineers Without Borders, and, you know, like how you could do stuff like that if you stay in academia. You know, there's a lot of research done in the federal government, you know, if you work at NIH, but even if you work at, like, you know, USDA and other places. And so doing more career exploration beyond just, I want to do research, but, you know, what are the different sectors and types of careers that you could pursue research in, even at a private sector company, you know. So that's something that maybe I wish I had done more of, and or taken more seriously the opportunities that were presented to me around that.
I think that was everyone, right? Wonderful. So at this point, we want to open up the floor to questions from the audience. So if any students have any questions, we would like you to You can take off your microphone and speak, or if you don't have access to a microphone, you can type it in and I will be able to see it there.
Hi, my name is Prun, and I have a question for Dr. Sanchez. As an international student, when you came to Winchester, how was what was the more challenging thing you faced as an international student?
Thank you for your question. It's very relevant nowadays also. What the biggest challenges was, as I mentioned before, it was feeling like an outsider all the time. It was very scary at the beginning. I mentioned that I came for a year to learn English, and I didn't learn much because I just hang out with people that speak Spanish all the time, because those were the ones that I could communicate at the time. So I learned a little bit. So when I came to graduate school, my English was really bad, and it was very, very scary. So losing that fear of not being able to communicate was probably one of the biggest challenges. And like I said, the way that I went through was to finding people, not necessarily people that speak Spanish, but people, other international students on campus. And we all felt like we were going through the same challenges. We all laughed at the silly mistakes that we made, the nuances that we don't recognize from the beginning, the cultural differences. So having that group of people to discuss it and to talk and even to learn from was very helpful. Language was an issue, definitely. Food was a problem for me because I didn't like any of the food here. I like it now, but at that time it was hard because I wanted, first of all, I think one of the things that was very, very difficult for me was to understand that not everybody is like me, right? I'm the outsider here, and everybody else is different. But even within the people that are from here, there is a significant differences that makes them all unique. So to understand that and to get that perspective of being one unique person in the entire world was a big awakening for me, right? You think that everybody thinks like you. You think that everybody eats the same food that you do. You think that everybody speaks the same language or dance the same kind of music that you do, that kind of thing. So being aware of that differences was good. But it was at the same time very challenging, because then how we communicate. So finding that group of people that would help me, I had to rely a lot on my advisor. He was fortunately a very open-minded person. So I would go with him all the time to ask him, why is it that this works this way or the other way? What do they mean when they say this? And so communication was a problem. Other than that, I think once you overcome that fear of being different and that fear of making mistakes, I think, and once you have that group of people, I think things go a little bit smoother. Not that you completely overcome that fear, but definitely it gets easier as you move along. So it was tough, not having your family, not having your friends from back home, but see it as an opportunity of learning, of growing, of meeting very interesting people. Again, meet possibly the partner of your life. So it's just see it that way, seeing it as an opportunity to learn and to meet people, and that helps. But it is tough. And again, biggest challenge for me was the communication portion.
Well, thank you. I completely understand, because I am from Madagascar, so English is not my first language too. So I feel like for language barrier is one of my challenging thing. So I'm a mechanical engineering, so I feel like one of the challenging part of besides communication and stuff is when taking a class of English terms is really hard. So yeah. It slowed me down from learning faster than my other classmates. So it's yeah, I don't know, it's one of the things, but I think it's one of the challenging things for scientific terms is really hard.
Yeah, it is hard, but it gets easier as you keep going. And like I said, ask questions, don't feel afraid. everybody understands that, first of all, everybody is gaining by having you around. Not imagine the amount of people that had the opportunity to meet someone from Madagascar. So take that into yourself and make it a strength, and think of, well, okay, they're learning from me as well as I'm learning from them. So when I'm asking a question, I'm actually doing them a favor at the same time. So think of it that way, and it might help. Just that way you can lose your fear of asking for questions and maybe talk to other people. But yeah, it is hard, but it will get easier, I promise.
Thank you so much.
Hello, I just wanted to say thank you all for taking your time. And I did have a question for kind of all of you. What was one career, like if you guys made a career mistake, and how were you guys able to like bounce back and learn from that?
I would say for me, I made a mistake early in my career. I think I was maybe 2 years in the company, and there was this part of the organization that was, I don't know, maybe dysfunctional. And I told somebody that I thought they had problems and I didn't necessarily want to go to that organization at that time. And it kind of stuck with me, and it's probably the best or part of the company to be in. And so for years, I don't mean like 10 years, everybody would say, she doesn't want to go there. She doesn't want to go there. And nobody asked me again. So for me, unless you really, really, really don't want to go somewhere, you stay open and you stay flexible. So that was the mistake that I made early. It stuck with me for a really, really long time. And it probably like set me back a little bit. But I think I'm catching up now.
I'll go next. At first I was like, mistake, what mistake have I made? Okay, so 2 years ago, I was offered coaching, like executive type coaching, to help with a specific area of development, which was, and I think Dr. Sanchez mentioned this when she was talking earlier around speaking up and being your voice and your opinion matters. What I found early on, I was definitely speaking up and providing value. That's another piece of advice, is to know your value and what you bring to the company or organization that you're in. As I got into different roles for development assignments, where it was outside of what I would call my comfort zone or the area that I was a part of, which was the technical organization, research and engineering, to, for instance, supply chain and other parts where there's business majors and folks who have been doing this for years, I think I got to the point was like, okay, they know what they're talking about. I'm not going to get in there and say anything because I haven't done this that long, and, clamming up. And so in putting me in those situations, the expectations were, okay, we want to hear what Nicole thinks, and I wasn't offering that. So I think I would call it a career mistake, but I will also say that I'm thankful that someone, and which is why I think that constructive feedback is really important, because it wasn't necessarily them saying you're not good enough, but being willing to hear that feedback and then go with it and figure out what the root cause may have been around it, and then, go from there. So that's how I learned from it. I took the feedback, and even now, I still have to pump myself up sometimes before I go into a meeting. I refuse to go in and not say anything. Try to find some value to bring into these discussions. They have me there for a reason. What's my perspective? And the other one that I learned in that whole journey with the coach was just around, what is my point of view? So all of you right now, you're doing research, and even when you go to your professor and you're sharing information, knowing what you feel is the point of view and the thought is kind of really important, because that will go with you going in ahead of time, what perspective others are bringing, but what is your stand. And I wasn't taking a stand, and if you don't stand for something, you fall for anything, right? Most people know that statement. So what you stand for, what you believe, what is your thought. You studied this, and being strong and knowing that has come from that mistake, if you want to call it that. I call it a growth opportunity.
So I would say one mistake I made early on was thinking that, and this is particularly in the private sector, that if you just do your job and it'll be observed and you will then be promoted and move forward. And I didn't recognize that there's a whole separate game of, and I think Dr. Kennedy might have been the one who alluded to it earlier. There's this whole separate game of how you kind of promote yourself and your brand, kind of. And one example that I think it was her that references, like, if you're not on the hot project, there's a problem. So how do you get yourself on the right projects that you get the visibility? That's one example of, yes, you have to, do the job and do it well, but you also have to promote yourself in a way that's helping you to get promoted, having advocates, having a mentor, having, the right boss that's going to help you move forward. I would say right in that same time frame too, when I was kind of feeling this slump in my job, I started slacking off on the work I was delivering. And I had a really good, she wasn't my boss, but kind of our team lead for the project we were on. And she came to me about my work and was like, I'm having to do a lot of editing with your work. And I was like, I felt horrible. One, because I respected her a lot. And I was like, I didn't want to put more burden on her, because I knew she already had a lot, but I also felt ashamed. And I was like, wow, I let myself slip, because I was in this slump. And so even if you're doing something and you maybe are not in the place you are in your career, don't let your excellence slack off, and one, just for your personal integrity. And for two, thankfully, she, I think, knew that I had more than that. And she's actually written me recommendations and stuff. So we're at a good place, but you never know. It could have been someone else who wasn't going to give me that second or third chance. I didn't need a third chance, sorry, second chance. I cleaned it up real quick. And have their respect after that. So don't slack off, even if you're in a kind of a bad spot.
What I'm hearing from everyone is that mistakes are not an end, but a part of the process. And that they'll usually help you become even stronger in a skill, which will lead to even more opportunities that maybe before that mistake, you wouldn't have been open to because you didn't know to work in that area. So I just want to stress for everyone that mistakes are part of the process, and it'll make us better scientists, engineers, and mathematicians if we're more willing to embrace those opportunities where a mistake may come as a result, but it'll lead to a greater goal.
Yes, and I'll just add that those two examples, are completely separate from all the mistakes in terms of failed experiments or bad data, or like those failures. I could, have a ton of that kind of stuff. That's just part of the process when you're in science and engineering, That's why they call it a eureka moment, because like most of your PhD career are failed experiments, and then you finally starts to click. And so, you're in it for 5-6 years because it's so many failed experiments. It's like the last year that you're really putting in your thesis because it's finally working. So I think that's another message, just to underscore what's being said, is don't feel like because you have a failed experiment or bad data or you made a bad calculation that I'm not good enough for this field. That's just par for the course. That's just how it goes. So
even if the summer program project doesn't work out, right? Because I think, that little 6 weeks or even 4, sometimes depending on when you start, you may not be able to achieve all the objectives because it just didn't work out. The equipment didn't arrive in time, but being able to morph it or show some level of degree of being able to dig in and show the results and maybe modify what the original objectives were is important too, as you all are working your projects this summer, because I know with COVID, you may not be able to do all you would like to, but you can contribute something to the field. And, you know, having that in the mindset for even the time you're there for that project, the grad student that you're supporting, the professor or whoever, they will appreciate, because that's one less thing they have to read. And, you know, your contribution is useful.
Nice. Thank you for that. I believe Angie has a question for us.
Hi, my name's Angie. I have a question. As like through your journey, who has been somebody you guys have looked up to, and what was like the biggest piece of advice they gave you?
I had two mentors, I had more than two, but two that stuck out. So the gentleman that hired me, he was just very hard on me because he really wanted me to succeed. And so he was always behind me, pushing me to show up, to be above and beyond, which is not always good, but he was always pushing me to do that. And so that was very good. And then there was another gentleman who was my boss in toothbrushes, totally different background, totally unlike me, but he really gave good advice. He always talked about never doing what the crowd does. You do it more so doing what's right. And so that always sticks with me too. And I'm a part of a company, and his mindset was, you're just not part of the company, you are the company. So in whatever role you are, you should take leadership of that role. You should be your CEO. You should be making the decisions that are right. And that's another thing that's always stuck with me from him. So, and I think it's very important to have people that are mentors, but also people that are sponsors that help pull you up and give you opportunities that you would not have otherwise had. And both of those persons did that for me.
Go ahead, Dr. Vaughn.
I'll keep going in front of you, so go ahead.
No, it's fine. I'm still thinking, actually.
You're still thinking? Okay, because there's so many people, you know, when you talk about it takes a village, so many people have fed into me and supported me from family. My husband is like a coach, my mom, my dad, everybody family-wise. So your question comes in so many places. You know, I'll watch Oprah and I'll say, oh, Oprah says some enlightening things, but I think you mean from work. I'm hoping that's what you mean. I'm not sure where your motivation of the question came from, Angie, but just know that so many people, my friends, someone talked about the circle of friends that were from school, my sorority, I'm a Delta, my line sister, so many people. And I know that if I needed to call somebody today and just say, I need to talk, I have a full list. I used to call them the kitchen cabinet. I read a book. I love to read, so I've gotten motivation from different books as well. You know, just to ask for support, just to hear. My friend said to me the other day, and she's a doctor that has a PhD and a medical doctor, right? So she's at Berkeley, and no, she's at UCLA. Either way, she said to me the other day, you are brilliant. And I couldn't even accept her telling me that I was brilliant. Like, you know, all of us on this call right now, we're brilliant. And I was like, brilliant? I think I'm smart, but I don't know if I would say brilliant. So I'll just say that two ladies at work influenced me that they probably don't realize they did. And, you know, eventually I'll probably tell them, but both kind of had a personality that was a little bit intimidating to me. And it turns out that I could learn a lot from them. One helped me see that you can also have faith and, you know, be in the workplace. And she and I have gotten close, but I was intimidated by her personality for many years. And the other one is pretty senior person who was able to say, you know, let me help you, took the investment and took time to pour into me from the standpoint of work and I can watch. I think what I've learned in the roles that I've been in is that I have the opportunity to watch others' leadership style. And it doesn't mean that I have to be like them, but it also helps me to develop what my style can be, and that you can be yourself in these different meetings. You don't have to be like person X, Y, or Z. So I'm not necessarily putting any one person up there because there's too many to name, Angie. But just know, when you go to different places, you may find support in the least expected place, where it can be someone who you're intimidated by because their personality is so strong, to it's somebody that completely doesn't look like you, but they definitely are in your corner. So hopefully that helps.
That was, thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Soror Vaughn. What's up, Soror? How you doing? I agree that there's a lot of people, I wouldn't name one or two, but two pieces of advice that stand out to add to what's already been said. One is, making the least dramatic interpretation. And this kind of goes back to accepting feedback and, not being defensive about it. But just in general, when a situation happens, like what's the least dramatic interpretation of what just happened right now? And I think it helps you to kind of step back and not be too emotional about whatever just happened. And sometimes, particularly as you go through your career, that's more and more important, of like being able to come to something with, not to say you won't be assertive in whatever you need to do, but it helps you to come with a more level, perspective in how you approach it, and oftentimes get better results when you do it that way, taking out the emotion. The other way that's been presented to me is like, it's not about you, it's about the project. So when maybe you present some work and you're getting this feedback, it's not feedback per se about you and your abilities. It's about how can we make this project better. And so when you take it that way, then you're the one leading it, and it's going to end up being better. So you're going to end up excelling further in whatever you're trying to do. The other piece is what I've observed, and it's come a little bit in terms of advice, but also in just what I'm observing, is that a lot of these great leaders you see, they're building the plane as they fly it. They don't have all the answers. They are, stepping on each step that's lit for them in front, putting one foot in front of the other. They're working hard. No, I'm not at all saying that, but you have what it takes. It's, there's a lot of, it's not like they have it all together and are now rolling something out, but there's a lot of, figuring out as you go. And so if you are in a position or in your project and you're figuring out as you go, that's what a lot of people, even the most successful ones, are doing.
All right, so try to be very quickly here. It's very interesting what I'm going to say, because I had to start by saying that I'm a feminist, and I do believe there are a lot of women out there that are very, very experienced, and that they have a lot of good qualities that I would like to emulate at some point. But interestingly enough, the three people that I feel had impacted my life are my advisor, my father, and my husband. And three men that are very, very different to each other and very different to me. So I think it goes with someone saying, you get the mentorship from people that you less sometimes expected. They, more than advice, I felt that they always believed in me when I didn't. They all three, in some ways or another, at different times in my life, had supported me when I feel like I'm falling down. So it's just having that, again, people around you that gives you the confidence when you're lacking it, and when you feel that you don't get you don't believe in yourself. And then those three people, and not to say that my mom, for example, didn't do it, but for some reason, my dad was the one that got the PhD in the family first. My advisor was the one that granted me and helped me to go through it. And my husband is the one that has been with me since then. So it is very, very interesting that I'm saying this. And actually, thank you for the question, because I never thought about it before. It's very a surprise for me that I'm saying this, because like I said, I do believe that there are a lot of women out there that I would like to emulate, but those are the first people that I thought about when you asked that question. And just because they got me, they were in my corner when I needed them.
Thank you for answering.
Other questions, folks?
I don't want to make it run too long, but I had a question about if you've ever like really hit a wall or like a lull. I know you said that you hit a slump and how you go about remotivating yourself, because I feel like if you hit those types of things, I hear a lot of people hit those types of walls in grad school. How do you go about, or maybe you're put on a project you're not particularly motivated for, how do you go about finding a different source of motivation for those types of things?
So I can start and just kind of elaborate when I hit my slump and was about to take off for a job in grad school. You know, I mentioned that I definitely leaned on my faith and did a lot of, you know, searching in terms of what was it that I really wanted out of grad school. And that's when I started discovering careers that were outside of academia, you know, perhaps working. There was a book, something about climbing out of the ivory tower or something, but started looking at those careers. I also discovered science and technology, public policy too. And so those areas where I still needed a PhD got me really excited. And I actually even went over and took a class in the public policy department at Georgia Tech. And it was just so fascinating and eye-opening, and that really jolted me to say, like, wow, there's this whole other world out there of careers in science policy that sounds so interesting and so impactful. Or I could work at a company and be able to, you know, be doing this. So it was like a refining of my purpose that got me out of my slump. And not that it wasn't hard after that, you know, there was still a lot of failed experiments and such, but it gave me that motivation to kind of get through.
I was going to say, for me, I definitely hit a slump in graduate school, definitely. And in career too, a number of times. And I think for me that I've since learned, whenever I hit a slump, it's right before it's something like a next level up or something better. And for me, I don't even know how I got out the one in grad school. I think I had somebody to tell me, okay, you need to push through this. It was my advisor. She was like, what the heck are you doing? So she definitely helped me get out of the slump. But from then on, I think I've come to realize that you just have to push through sometimes, and it's about the grit to get to that next place, because the things that are worth having are not easy. So if you learn to push through, you can get to that next place a little bit better.
I'd add with the slump, where in grad school, it is also what refocused me was like the schedule, and having a fixed schedule, because it can seem so ambiguous and so kind of nebulous, and time just seems like it's all this time. But trying to get to some type of a schedule, and even to the point of, okay, if I create lists and try to work checklists, like going back to some really basic ways of showing that I'm making progress, even if things weren't exactly working out, that helped me. But all those of the above too, the people, talking to somebody, making sure, in grad school we had the group of us that would decompress, so stepping away from it, talking to each other, supporting. So support system is critical in all this throughout life.
We also had a question about advice for improving our writing. What did you all do to improve your writing when you did meet with like edits and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was just process of, working through it. I would submit things, and then the advisor was basically throwing it back to me like, this is not it. So, you get better at writing by writing. And there are different things out there that you can use to help figure out, okay, this is the best way to structure documents to get your point across. But it really was just getting the edits, and then seeing you leveraging other reports too. So if you have people on in your group who have written journal articles, you can see what is the method in doing it. So there is some structure that you can follow. But that's pretty much how I did it. I don't know if others have some other ways.
I would just add that, you know, when you get the edits, read the edits, process the edits, learn from the edits, you know, especially now with track changes, you could just say accept all changes. Don't do that. Like actually read through the edits, because that's how you're learning to be a better writer.
And read as much as you can. You learn a lot also from reading them, reading other articles, reading other people's writings, and yeah, ask people that you're comfortable with for edits all the time, even if it's more than one person. Just ask someone to read what you're writing. That's help a lot.
Definitely. And find somebody who you like, who you understand, who you like their style, and try to emulate that style. And always, for me, it's to write for understanding, to make sure that other people understand it, not to be, you know, up here, but to make sure that whoever you're writing for can read it and follow and be enthusiastic by it.
Well, this was fantastic. I want to thank you all for joining us today and really just give our appreciation to Dr. Vaughn, Dr. Kennedy, Dr. Wayman, and Dr. Sanchez. I think the information and insight you've provided us today is just so invaluable, and we really appreciate the time and energy you gave our community today.